Maya has never been my favorite character in Degrassi, mainly because she's not a beautiful emo boy with a wonderful smirk, but I still really like her character. There is so much to dig into, and I don't recall ever feeling annoyed or tired of seeing her on screen. Then again, I don't feel that way with a lot of characters that people get annoyed by, so maybe I'm an outlier in that. Now, of course, there are some legitimate complaints against the character, but a lot of people seem to hold very dumb criticisms about Maya. One of the things I've seen is that she doesn't have flaws, and like with a lot of the ones that I'm going to outline, they make me wonder if the people saying this has actually watched the show. Yes, Maya has a lot of flaws. For one, she gets way too wrapped up in other people's business. She sees it as her own personal mission and her own duty to help everyone in their problems, especially if they don't want her to get involved. She feels she has to resolve everything, which leads into another complaint that Maya is annoying and always has to be the one to do everything. She's always on screen and just making it all about herself. But this is an intentional part of her character. This goes into her anxiety and the permanent scar left on her by Cam. Remember him? Maya certainly does. In hindsight, she feels that she could have done something to save him, even though, as we saw, there really wasn't very much for her to do. She didn't know how bad it was, and she did try when she saw opportunities to help him. Yet to Maya, she sees Cam's suicide and depression as something she could have had a direct hand in curing. And so anytime she sees someone acting dangerously, especially if they're close to her or have had any interaction with her at all, like Zig and Miles, she feels it's her personal duty to step in and save them, because if she doesn't, then they're just going to end up like Cam, and it's going to be all her fault. From the outside, it looks like the show forgot about Cam, when really it informs basically everything she does after season 12. As someone on the subreddit pointed out, for the longest time until next class, she tried very hard to just push past him, move on with her life, and move on from being the girlfriend of the dead guy. But she never really escaped that, and frankly, that's one of the most interesting things about her character, even if it makes her sometimes annoying and causes us to be like, ugh, Maya, what are you doing and why are you here again? But the reason why it never crosses over into feeling like actual frustration and angry annoyance for me is because they're telling an interesting story with it. I did cringe when Maya broke into Miles' house to see if he was okay, but it was a really important moment to have. And frankly, I feel like her story would have been less impactful if they would have avoided doing this. Another flaw that she has is she's not really good at PR, especially with how she interacted with VJ when he covered her song initially. A lot of people have criticized her for basically being musically perfect and essentially a teen star, but this episode showed that she's not really big outside of her school and that one producer guy that happened to find her song. Hell, her famous video Not Okay only had 400 views, where VJ's stuff had views in the thousands. Sure, Peter points out that she's doing everything right to accomplish the goals that she has, but she's not yet achieved them, and she has a long way to go, including learning how to interact with people who may be important to work with later on, and also not to freak out when people cover your work, something that you just kind of have to accept when you become a huge artist like this, especially in music. Although an artist should never accept blatant stealing, which of course wasn't what happened here, but just a sort of PSA announcement so that no one gets the wrong idea from what I'm saying. She also has a lot of issues with doing things before actually thinking them through. Breaking into Miles' house, wrecking that jerk's phone in the bar, and treating Peter like a possible romantic interest just to get over Zig. Oddly enough, one of the other dumbest complaints I've seen is that Maya has flaws. And of course, who besides Mary Sue's don't? Isn't the point of character writing that they have flaws and that they're interesting? Hell, it's the flaws usually that make these characters interesting. You can give all the screen time you want to a character, but if we only see them acting perfectly or as any moral and smart person would in any situation, then they don't resonate with us. We want to see people grow and learn from their mistakes and the things that they do wrong, and not just simply things that that they technically made the right decision with the information they were given, but just flat out, they did the wrong thing, even with the information that they had available at the time. And something else that I want to point out, you cannot like the character as a person. I frankly don't like Esme as a person, and if I were to know her in real life, I wouldn't want to be her friend. Of course, my heart goes out to her, but I don't like people who use other people like that. And that's the same with Maya. You can think of her as someone who you really wouldn't want to be around in real life, but that fact alone doesn't mean she's a bad character or a poorly written one. It just means that this character has personality. It means that they're their own person, which means that they can't be friends with literally everyone, and they're bound to tick someone off in the wrong way. But again, that's not poor writing, that's wonderful character writing, because the person on the page and on the screen is acting like a real human being. One last thing that I've seen Maya criticized for is basically always being of the mindset that her life in particular is hard. And yes and no, her life is and has been hard. She has had some things come easy to her, like she started high school basically a musical prodigy, and she really doesn't have to try to get guys to like her. But there's a few things to remember. One, she has faced hardship, i.e. Cam, Tristan being a dick of a friend, and being intensely cyberbullied not once, but twice, one of the times including getting swatted. And then also remember that Maya's a teenage girl, hormones going crazy, and her life is just starting. She's starting to become aware of hardships and things that she didn't have to face in childhood. There's a reason why a lot of teenagers will make those posts saying like they want to go back to being a kid. Hell, a lot of adults even do that still. Not just a lot more responsibilities, but your brain developing and being able to recognize things that you were able to ignore before. And need I remind people, Maya has depression. Now, it didn't come to a head until season 3, but it's something that's been building up ever since Cam died. In part, her depression is a culmination of feeling like anyone who ever interacts with her ends up getting hurt or in a terrible situation in some way, which it can very easily seem that way, especially if you have a depression brain, where essentially your mind is fighting against you getting better. Your brain is basically looking for any reason to put yourself down. The slightest connection to wrongdoing it can find, it will use. It will also look for anything to basically remind herself that life sucks, especially her life. That's one of the reasons why the scene where Maya lists out all the stresses in her life really strikes the nail on the head for how distorting depression brain can be. On paper, it seems like these are just normal stressors, but to Maya and in her mind, it seems like the world is caving in on her. Now, that's not to say that some of these stressors aren't important or hard to deal with, but a trick of the mental camera perspective really comes to play in this sort of situation. It makes me sad that there's just so much unfounded hate towards Maya. She is such a well-written character, even during the first part of season 13, where a lot of people were being very poorly written. For the most part, she was able to stay consistent, and everything she did made sense. She's a person with understandable flaws that may get under our skin, but hers is a very important story to have told, and I'm glad Degrassi decided to tell it. I guess I'm rather curious now, so like Maya, do you see any other characters that get a lot of unfounded hate towards them? Feel free to let me know in the comments. I do read all of them and try to respond to them when I have something to say. Thank you very much for consuming this video, and until next time.